Being 7 o'clock, we'll call to order the meeting of the Clinton Select Board for Wednesday, May 18th, 2022. First order of business is public comment. Just to be clear, there's not going to be any audience participation during the non-union salary survey discussion, so if you're here to speak about that, I suggest you do it now. Is anyone here for public comment? Mr. Bailey?
Good evening. First of all, I just want to start off with, for those that, when I was walking out of town hall today, for those that were told that I was here to ask the selectmen to disapprove the raises for the non-union, they were lied to. That was not my intent. So anyone that was told that, I just asked you guys, and I saw your last meeting. I had no knowledge of a salary study, and I would just ask you to reconsider your vote and just table it. I'm not against it. I just don't know about it. You know, I've been here 7 years, and approximately 6 years ago, they had a salary study. The first one I've ever sat through in my life. I was in the Marines for 30 years. I didn't really have any input. But the company that came in, they sat down with us. They went over the job descriptions. The gentleman that I had showed me a kind of generic one, worked with me on it. Then he showed me the comparable communities and how my job would stack up against theirs, and then showed us the salary grid. And it all made sense. I never, it just made sense to me, and I was aware of it. This one here, I had no knowledge of. The last that I saw was when you had your last meeting, and I know they had a meeting here with a brief, but it was in the middle of the afternoon. And I understand the open meeting law is posted 2 days prior, but I also think there's an intent that a meeting should be held when people can attend it. I mean, you don't have your meeting at 10 o'clock in the morning. So I would just ask, I don't want to go to those, I can go as in-depth as you want, but there was a lot of questions I have for that what is it, Collins Group, I believe it was called, that I don't think any of you could answer. And I just wanted, to be able to participate in the process like others were. And that, and I don't get involved in anybody else's salary. It doesn't really concern me. I mean, as a taxpayer, it does. But in here, if someone gets a good pay raise, congratulations to them. I'm not looking for $1 million. I just want to know how they came to this. I don't know what community they compared me to. It's hard for mine because a lot of towns around here don't have a full-time agent. A lot of them are now districts. How did they compare me? Did they look at different things? I mean, I look on that salary grid, and it looks like people that don't have a degree are now getting huge jumps as if they did. Well, if it requires it, you don't have it. I just want answers. That's really what I'm trying to get at. So I just would ask you to table it. If it doesn't make town meeting, you got two options, right? We've had special town meetings in the past. You've also have you just retroactive raises, which I've known you've done with other unions. But I would just ask, again, I know I keep saying the same thing, just table it so we get it, the company could come in, the firm could come in. When we have the medical insurance companies come in, Mr. Kittredge sends out an email that they're in the building, and we can go down and you can meet with them. The same with the investment companies. Just a simple email, hey, this firm's going to come in, they're going to brief it, answer questions, and then, like I said, then everybody be aware of it, and it'd be all in the open. We talk about transparency, we talk about accountability. I kind of like to see it. All right? Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Again, for everyone coming in late, we're not going to be doing audience participation for the non-union salary study discussion, so if you have a comment now, would be the time. Other than the personnel board chair is going to be here to answer questions. If you have a statement ahead of time.
Are you going to let me speak later, or should I
Yes.
speak now? I'll be speaking.
Okay.
As long as I get a chance to speak later.
Yes.
If I don't, I'll speak now.
Yes.
Okay.
Any other public comment?
So I'd like to
Just come up and state your name and address, please.
Jaleesa Schnard.
Just when you sit down, so the mic can pick it up, please.
Jaleesa Schnard. I am the vice chair of the personnel board. I just wanted to briefly answer his questions that this wasn't just done over one meeting. We've had several meetings. Ed has attended. Selectman Kerrigan has attended. It was more than one meeting that this was discussed. So I just wanted to let Mr. What is his name?
Bailey.
Mr. Bailey know
Yep.
that this wasn't just one meeting. That this has been going on since.
So just to briefly talk about this under public comment, back in, I believe it was August of last year, the previous HR manager, when she was employed, signed a contract with the Collins Center. That department head signed the contract, and she started the process. At the time, and still, there never was the intent that this would be a full a review of all the descriptions, nor would it include any discussions with employees. So the previous salary study that took place in 2017 with a different company, that was the case because we were starting from scratch, and they sat down with every single employee for 45 minutes. They drafted their job description, they made changes if necessary, and she built that previous salary study based on conversations with every employee. This was not that, and there was no intention for this to be like that. This was purely a market survey. Had nothing to do with employees, had nothing to do with job descriptions. Her job wasn't to get involved with changing those. She didn't care. It was merely, she's taking the 55 titles that we have for our employees, and she is going out to comparable communities, I think there were 12, and getting the minimums and maximums for 55 titles. And it had nothing to do with who was working in those positions whatsoever. The Collins Center did not speak to any employees or myself regarding the job, what we were doing, what we weren't doing. That wasn't the intent of this, and the price reflected it. It was a $9,000 contract, and the intent of this was strictly a market survey with no involvement from the employees, because we had done that 7 years ago, and we didn't feel that that was required at this time. If we do this again in another 5, absolutely, we can consider that at that time. But that wasn't the intent here. And so I just wanted to say that, you know, contrary to what I've been hearing and various other things, this was absolutely not completed by the Personnel Board. We didn't start this process. It was under the direction of the Human Resource Manager, and it was the Collins Center who did all of the research and then came up with the salary grid. She did the classifications, she created the grid, and she got all of the data from the communities. And then she came back, and then we kind of discussed it from there. But the work that was done in the classifications that the employees fall in was absolutely 100% under the direction of the Collins Center and not the Personnel Board. And I want to be very, very clear about that it was in some way meant to give certain people raises and others not. That did not happen under any circumstances, and anybody says different is flat out lying.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, it's public comment. We can talk, it's on the agenda, we're going to talk about it later. This is public comment.
I can talk,
Nope, it's public comment. Any other public comment?
make a motion to move it.
It's public comment.
That's fine. All right.
Hi, I'm Deborah Goodsell. I'm the director at your senior center. I just want to say that I have been attending the Personnel Board meetings because it does affect myself and my staff, and I was kind of listening in to see what was going on. And I just want to say that I think this is a great study. It was something the town paid for, and not just because it affects myself or my staff, but because it puts our employees where they're supposed to be in the marketplace. So we're not going to be training employees and then having them go someplace else where they're going to get paid a fair rate. So, I mean, like I said, these are employees that are not unionized, where the other unions have people fighting for them. We have you guys fighting for us. So I just want to thank you in advance for what you're doing.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on. We have, oh, sorry.
PJ Chamberlain, Clinton Firefighters, Local 3189 President. I heard this was the meeting where employees were going to get a 25% raise, so I didn't want to miss out on the opportunity. So, before I begin, I just want to make it perfectly clear. I am in no way opposed to raises for the non-union employees. I am all for it. I know they all do a great job for this town, and I fully support the studies to ensure that all town employees are paid accordingly. Having said that, I just, the process, and I know Alexis, when before she left, she was in the process of conducting, a study, salary study and whatnot for, I believe for the fire department, other unions as well. But like I said, I encourage and I improve all employees to, make fair market value. Seems like, kind of like an unfair home court advantage up here. I know for us, like in the union, I know unions get a bad rap, but, we have to, like Deb Goodsell said, we have to fight for everything we get. Sometimes we have to fight, opposing factors, Miracle O'Connell, the Mass Municipal Association, when they try to steal those, rights away from us, which, nothing against them, they're doing their job. But, collective bargaining wise, we sit down, to discuss contracts. Sometimes we go months, years, on an expired contract. So if, all I'm saying is if there's going to be a salary study, I'd love to see it, across the board, for, fire department, police, teachers, DPW, because I know we're in the same situation. I know the teachers are in the same situation, like Ms. Goodsell said, we're the town, we're turning into like a stepping stone or trampoline for other jobs that are, more high paying. In terms of, studies and stuff like that, the ALS study was conducted in March of 20, and we're still trying to get that approved. This study kind of just went through like that. But again, my point of being here, it's not to disagree with the salaries and the raises. I'm all for that. I applaud them. But I just hope that the union and bargaining units get the same fair treatment as well. That's all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, we'll move on to review of minutes. We have minutes for review and approval of April 27, 2022. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to accept the minutes from April 22nd, 2022.
I'll second.
Motion made, second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all is in favor? Aye. Opposed? 5-0. Library Director is seeking permission from the Select Board on behalf of the Library Board of Trustees to surplus and dispose of books and materials from the library archives. Ms. Letarte.
Hello.
How are you?
I believe you have this material that I'm actually going to read from. And basically, this process started 2014, shortly after I started, but it was a trustee-led program to review all of the material that maybe should have been weeded 50, 60, 70 years ago and wasn't. And she took it upon herself, volunteered her time, which is why it took so long, to look at all the items, and we together figured out what items should be saved, things involving Clinton, things involving the surrounding towns, things that sort of represented eras in which the library, before it was in its previous iterations of a Mechanics Institute and then the association. And so the board voted after this process was over to surplus it, and then we were told that we needed to bring that towards you to surplus it. And our plan is that whatever the process is for surplusing material and having it done hopefully by the end of June. And if nothing happens, then I believe we can donate it to the Friends of the library, who then can dispose of it, have a separate sale rather than a one batch sale. They can do their own sale. I did also, which is not in here because she didn't know about this, reach out to the Mass Board of Library Commissioners. They have a preservation specialist, and he came and basically said, we're doing all the right things, all the things he would recommend for, what we think we should save. We have that written down. I know that you also have links to these reports. There's about 6 of them over the past 8 years about what's been going on. And we really want to make sure that we did this process in a fair and equitable and due diligent sort of manner. But Gloria Parkinson, who spearheaded this, she's been on this project from day one, has COVID and didn't want to share it. So that's why I'm here.
Okay. So what can we do to help here, Michael?
I think what the determination that the selectmen would need is to allow them to surplus that, since it's town property. So they would still have to follow the surplus process, as the director indicated, but the selectmen need to authorize the surplusing of that material.
And the plan is to have like a book sale?
So the way it's worked is that it's one unit. We could easily just have a book sale,
Yeah.
but this is one. Okay, you want it, you take the whole batch.
that
But
happen
what
often?
I'm saying is, if we don't get a buyer for this, then we go to the next thing and donate to the Friends, and the Friends could have a book sale, and it could get
thank you.
sold one by one. That is way more work, but it might be, we have an alternative plan if the surplusing doesn't work. Let's just put it that way.
Okay. We just have to declare it surplus property?
All you have to do is surplus it, yes.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, the vote for the board is like Mr. Wood said, we voted to declare surplus property. Then, as Mr. Wood mentioned, the library would still have to comply with Massachusetts 30B, disposition of surplus property. So I would ask that the vote be that the board's inclined to vote to surplus it, and that the library then coordinates with Mr. Ward and Mr. Procurement Office to make sure that we're complying, and they can work with Mr. Ward.
Which we absolutely would like to do.
Just make sure we're complying with the disposition statutes, that's all.
Question?
Has the Historical Society had an opportunity to go through any of the books that might be relevant to the town prior to any release of surplus property?
I may have reached out to them. I know it's been so many years, I'm not sure. I mean, I certainly will reach out to them again and give them opportunity, but we did pick the stuff that was relevant to Clinton and put it aside. That's not going out. That's definitely something we want to keep and share.
That's the only thing I would ask, is that, if there's an opportunity for that commission to go through, if there's anything relevant to the town's history, that they be given an opportunity to acquire it prior to any release of the surplus.
What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion, we allow the surplus to the Clinton Public Library.
I'll second.
And just to clarify, that's with working collaboration with the Chief Procurement Officer,
Yes.
the Town Administrator. Okay. And allowing the Historical Commission to review in case there's anything valuable there. Any other discussion or questions? Hearing none, all's in favor? Aye. Opposed? 5-0.
Thank you.
Keep us posted, thank you. We'd like to welcome Robert Dolan from the Mass Development to talk about the PACE program. It gives an incentive for energy-efficient upgrades to commercial property. Mass Development has been approached by a cannabis company in Clinton interested in this program, but it needs to be adopted by the Select Board first. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. As you mentioned, I'm Rob Dolan from Mass Development. I'm here to present on the Property Assessed Clean Energy Program, and I believe you folks have the materials with you. So I'll briefly go through the slide presentation and leave ample time for questions and answers at the end. But at a high level, Property Assessed Clean Energy Program is a way for a commercial property owner in your community to finance energy improvements, whether it's renewable energy or energy efficiency, think solar panels, new HVAC systems, to their existing commercial property. So it's an alternative financing measure than, say, a conventional loan if they were going to go to a typical bank. And so for PACE financing to move forward, you really need a property owner that wants to pursue PACE, and as well as a lender. In essence, we call them capital providers in the program that will give them the funds. It does require a municipal opt-in, and I'm here today to discuss with you folks what that means and a little bit more background on the program. Sorry, just pulling it up. So slide 2 just in essence gives more background on Mass Development. Hopefully you folks are familiar with us. We're a state agency that works with cities and towns on a number of different programs, whether it's brownfields remediation, the Cultural Facilities Fund program, issuing bonds for nonprofits in their community. And like I mentioned today, the PACE program is one of those programs that we do. It's relatively new. It was started in 2020. Like I mentioned, it allows commercial property owners to finance energy improvements. And some of the reasons why property owners would like to do that is because typically the PACE financing provides a longer payback period. And so, if you have a commercial property owner looking to install HVAC system or new windows or other energy efficiency measures, they may only see like 5 or 7 year terms, whereas under the PACE program, they can see longer financing repayment, sometimes 20 years, which is really helpful for them. It also allows, it's typically treated a little bit different on their balance sheet. It's not as debt, but more of an expense, because in essence, the mechanism for repayment of the loan is through a betterment assessment on the property, and that's where you folks come in. And so in essence, we require a municipal opt-in because if you go to the second slide, the assessment is in essence put on the property of the property owner voluntarily. So the property owner is going into this eyes wide open. They want to pursue the PACE program. And the way the debt is repaid to these capital providers is an assessment on their property. And so it's a line item on their property tax bill. And so in essence, cities and towns, obviously this isn't a mandate. They have to voluntarily opt into this because it does require some work in updating the tax software for that property owner. And there's obviously questions about what that means to their assessment and the existing property taxes, which I'll get to in a moment. The municipalities, we've done 2 of these deals so far, one in Greenfield and one in Boston, I'll get to in a moment. For the municipalities, the reason they've kind of opted in is it's in essence supporting a community property owner, a property owner in their community trying to lower expenses by getting energy efficiency systems in their commercial property. For the property owners, like I mentioned, it's treated a little bit different on the balance sheet, and so, if they have like a loan-to-value ratio that doesn't lend themselves to getting a regular loan through a conventional bank, this is another tool in the toolbox for financing, so it's another option. It also travels with the land. In essence, if the property owner sells their property, he or she, to the new owner, the assessment stays with that land. The principle behind that is you're putting in energy improvements that will reap the benefit over multiple years in the future, and so the new property owner is reaping those savings, and so they're responsible for the assessment. So that's attractive to some property owners because they don't know how long they're going to be in the property, and they don't know if they want to undergo a financing for solar panel or a new roof if they're not going to be there in 5 or 6 years. So PACE, I think this is the 4th slide, just to kind of just show you folks that PACE is really not new to the national market. There's been over $2 billion of financings, even though it's been relatively new to Massachusetts. Slide 5 just kind of gives you an idea that Connecticut and Rhode Island and other New England states are also doing this. The pie chart on the right side is pretty small, but those are the type of the deal that we're seeing. Typically, we see financing between $500,000 and $5 million. There's no minimum and there's no maximum. So slide 6 really just touches upon what I already mentioned. We did it was adopted in 26 under the Mass General Law, so this is a state-sponsored program. And it was live in July 28, 2020. Of course, COVID hit, so we did kind of a soft rollout. We didn't do a lot of advertising. We really just kind of waited for people to come and reach out to us so that we could understand what the program was and issue some guidelines and just make sure we did it right for the first few ones. We've had 2 projects done successfully, and we're seeing a lot more interest in the PACE program, so we have like 4 or 5 more in the pipeline. We are the lead program administrator. What that means is I meet with folks like you, I meet with municipal staff just to kind of educate them on PACE. Typically what happens is we have a property owner that's interested in doing a PACE financing. They ask us to reach out to city or town just to orient them on exactly what PACE is. And then, of course, they work with the city or town as well to kind of, brief them more on the project and what the financing may look like. And we work closely with you folks. If you do ultimately opt in and you find out there's a property owner, or the property owner determines that they want to move forward with the financing, we'll work very closely with you folks on making sure that, the tax software, you need any help updating the tax software, we're more than happy to help you folks with that. We found out that, many different cities and towns have different experience with betterment assessments and updating their tax software. Some cities or towns are like, we just have to call our provider, whether it's Munis or admins, or there's a host of different tax software out there for property taxes, and just call them up and they update it, and it's pretty clean. Some cities or towns are not familiar, or they don't really do betterment assessments. And we understand, senior town staff already is kind of at their bandwidth. They have a lot going on. So we hired a betterment assessment consultant called MuniCap. So ultimately, if a property owner comes through and applies for this, and you folks have opted in, we pay for the consultant to help the staff at the city or town kind of update the property tax software. And we pay for that. And if there's an upgrade to the tax software, we also will pay for that. We haven't seen that yet. Slide 7 is probably the slide that you're most interested in for the kind of flow of funds. So in essence, a property owner is looking for these energy improvements. They contact a capital provider, a lender in essence. The lender provides them with funds to do the energy improvements. And then ultimately, once the deal is closed, we provide the city or town with kind of the amortization schedule, which in essence is based on your tax cycle, whether it's quarterly or semi-annually or annually, I'm not sure what Clinton is, it will be an annual payment back to mass development, and ultimately we then pay the capital provider. And the reason we do that is because, kind of for the kind of how many of these we're going to see in the pipeline, that depends on the city or town and the commercial stock they have. But say for the city of Boston, they've done one. Obviously, they have a lot more commercial stock. They may see 5 or 6 PACE financings. And in essence, we didn't want the communities to have to keep track of each capital provider for each financing. Because obviously the capital providers and lenders, they change their names a lot. So in essence, your tax collector will remit a payment based on a certain set schedule to mass development, and then we disperse the funds to the capital provider. And so that's the mechanism under the PACE statute. Obviously, it would have been a lot cleaner if the capital provider and the property owner could just pay each other directly, but because this is an assessment, a betterment assessment, that's why the city or town actually has to get involved. Slide 8 is just eligible properties. Like I mentioned, it's commercial properties. Existing commercial properties, though Governor Baker did file an economic development bill expanding it to new commercial properties. It's also eligible for non-for-profits. We've had some interest from nonprofits. The one nuance with that is they actually have to receive a tax bill, which some nonprofits, they don't, and they don't necessarily want to set that precedent. And multifamily housing is a little bit more nuanced and complicated as well, because obviously you have a lot more stakeholders that have to opt in and sign off on it, whereas if you just have one commercial property owner that wants to apply, it's a lot easier, a lot cleaner for them. Eligible measures, like I mentioned, energy systems, renewable energy, pretty much anything that falls under that umbrella. What we typically see is solar panels, a new roof to support solar panels, HVAC systems, things of that nature. So slide 10 actually shows you the first one we ever did. And the good thing about this project is, we typically think about commercial properties and energy efficiency as like being significant buildings, whereas this is like a 12,000 square foot building in Western Mass in Greenfield. The owner bought the property, it needed a significant renovation, and he decided to do a significant amount of energy improvements. So he did a $450,000 PACE financing over 20 years. The interesting thing about this is that he had originally done short-term financing through a conventional loan, and he actually took out that short-term financing with a PACE loan because he was able to pay it over 20 years, which made it more budget helpful for him. The next slide is the other one that we've done. This is a significantly different project, 121 square foot building. It's got 13 commercial tenants. The property owner here, they needed funding for energy improvements, so they did a $787,000 financing. Again, it's over 20 years. So slide 12 is really key elements. Like I mentioned, this requires a municipal opt-in, either of the select board or a city council. It doesn't have to go to town meeting. And I believe you folks have the municipal opt-in language. It's a one-pager drafted by our council who works on the financing. Maximum financing is up to 20 years, depending on the useful life of the measure. So, solar panels, a roof will go to 20 years, windows a little bit shorter, lighting a little bit shorter. But if you do a bunch of different stuff, property owner does a bunch of different improvements on the property, and he or she has one improvement that's 20 years, the whole financing can be done over 20 years. The main thing behind this is energy cost savings must exceed the improvements. And so, the bottom line is we want folks to really save money over the course of their financing. And so the Department of Energy Resources is involved in the application process. So property owner supply them with information about energy improvements that they're doing. DUR will figure out exactly what the savings are, and then we'll figure out if they're actually saving money over the long term. Like I mentioned, if the property is sold, it travels with the land. Retroactive consideration for installed improvements, for example, like that Greenfield person, he had already done the financing for the energy improvements and he used the PACE loan to get kind of better terms. Again, this is third-party financing, what we call capital provider, so it's not state funds, it's not city or town funds. This is literally outside private lenders hooking up with the property owner to figure out how to finance things. There's 14 capital providers already registered. Mass Development helps kind of qualify them and make sure that they're above board. That said, we tell property owners if they have a bank that they have an ongoing relationship with, that wants they want to work with, we're more than happy to have them issue the loans on their PACE, if they have an ongoing relationship. And then the next slide, slide 13, this just kind of shows the process of how application comes in. This does require mortgage holder consent if there's a loan, a mortgage on the property. Those two deals I told you about, they did have loans on the property. The bank did provide them with mortgage holder consent, so they allowed the financing to move forward because they realized they had an ongoing relationship with the property owner. This was going to help the property owner lower expenses, improve the value of the capital asset, make it a more sustainable capital asset, and hopefully make it so they're more apt to stay current with their existing private mortgage. So the two questions I usually get from cities and towns is what does it mean for our staff, which I think hopefully I touched upon. We'll work closely with staff about updating that property owner's bill. As I said, we've done 2 of these deals so far, so I don't know how much in the pipeline there really will be. We don't see these coming through very frequently. For the other question we get a lot is what does it mean in the case of a default? And also what does it mean for the property taxes? So the waterfall of funds under the PACE statute is that property taxes always will get paid first. So any existing property taxes or assessments that the city or town has levied on the property owner is always first in line. Then comes the PACE assessment, and then any private mortgage comes after that, subordinated after that. And so property taxes will always get paid first, and then the PACE assessment. And the PACE assessment is a non-accelerating debt, which is also interesting for property owners, because what that means is if they miss a payment, the full balance isn't all of a sudden defaulted on. So if they do a $5 million loan and they miss one payment, the only thing that's outstanding or in default is the billed and uncollected amount. And so that's really the only part that's outstanding, and that's another reason why private mortgage folks are comfortable kind of getting subordinated, because they realize that they're not next in line behind the full balance of the loan. They're only next in line after whatever's outstanding. And so in essence, the property taxes are first in line. They'll never get subordinated. And then in the case of default, the lien is actually Master Development Council will take care of all the closing documents and handles recording at the registry. This is slide 13, I believe. The lien is assigned to the city, and then it's assigned to Mass Development, and then we assign the lien to the capital provider. The capital provider is the only one in charge of kind of pursuing a remedy of default. So the city or town is not engaged in any kind of default proceedings. They don't have to worry about exactly what's outstanding and pursue them for default or make sure they're staying up and current. It's immediately transferred to the capital provider. It's almost like a private mortgage in essence. And then the next slide is 14, and this is the 54 communities that have opted in so far. You can see it's kind of a broad swath of kind of municipalities. The last 3 that have opted in that I've met with have been Dudley, Hudson, and Lynn, so very different kind of municipalities. And the next slide, the final, and all this is online, all the information providing you, the PowerPoint, the guidelines, more background, a video. We have a Mass Development website with PACE that has all this kind of information. And the next slide is just really the flow of kind of the process. Really, Mass Development's in the middle, trying to direct traffic and help folks out as much as we can. Obviously, the print on this is really, really small. But in essence, I've mentioned to you kind of your role in the process. You opt in. And opting in just means that you are on board with any potential PACE financing. If a property owner does pursue PACE financing and we get an application, we will immediately reach out to you folks so you're familiar with it and understand it. And then we can start working on updating your tax software for the process. We send you a simple questionnaire. and then work with you folks. And after closing the PACE financing, your tax software system doesn't have to be updated, usually like a lag up to a year from the closing of the financing till when the first bill is due. So there's ample time in between. And then the next slide, the final slide, just my information, my contact information, if you folks have any questions. So I know I ran through a lot of stuff right there, and hopefully I gave a high-level overview, and I'm happy to answer any questions you guys have, you folks have.
Anything from the board? Michael, as the assessor or the tax collector, had a chance to look into this, or I know Mr. Kittredge is here.
Yeah, I know the treasurer collector is here. I don't know if you would have any comment, but when we did have the presentation from Mass Development, the principal assessor did take part in that as well. So we felt it was something that certainly is doable. We're just kind of the pass between. We're collecting the money and sending it to Mass Development. So there has been a business, we don't, not sure which one, but there is business that has reached out to Mass Development about this program. So I don't know if how close they are, or if it's just initial discussions, but there might be some interest locally.
Yeah, I think it's initial discussion. So our business development person who handles this area is on vacation, Rob Anderson, but he did just mention there is a business exploring it. The typical businesses we see exploring it are, like I mentioned, commercial properties, whether they're trying to retrofit an existing mill or it's a factory. We've seen some cannabis grow facilities as well interested because they're high energy use and they're trying to update their facility to lower expenses and get new kind of energy improvements there. So that's the typical businesses that we see interested.
Great. Questions, discussions, temperament?
The only question I have, it wouldn't have an effect on our taxes. We don't have to give a break if they move into this program.
Absolutely, it does not affect your taxes. Doesn't hopefully it improves the value of the properties and you folks, get more tax revenue, but it doesn't directly impact anything.
What's the pleasure of the board? We can wait if you want to digest this, or just looking for a temperature check.
If the principal assessor's already sat in on the presentation.
I'd make a motion, we accept it. Enter into it.
I'll second that motion.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? 5-0.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mr. Chair, we'll just have the agreement subject to review by town council before you sign, if that's okay.
That's fine with me. Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Next up is a final review of the annual town meeting warrant. This has to be posted. We've discussed it. Michael, is this warrant, does this warrant reading through again, or do we want to summarize? I guess I'll leave this to the board too. Do we want to go over blow by blow again? Do we want to summarize anything that's new or different? I'm happy to do either. What's new or different? Anything?
Yeah.
Well, one article, I think which solicitor mentioned at the last meeting, that the Article 3 was added. And again, I'm going to leave the wording. This is just the intent. They'll leave the wording up to town council. But I think Mr. Gibbons indicated last meeting that the new grid for the salary study would have to be an amendment to the personnel bylaw. So that was added since last meeting. I think we're looking to perhaps remove the Article 10 and 11, the unpaid bill ones, and the closeout of any unexpended warrant article. Currently, we ask departments about the balance in the current warrant articles, and most of them responded that they were looking to close those out either this fiscal year or in the near future. I spoke with the accountant, and she didn't have any other account really that she was looking to put on that list. So it did a few last year, and I think next year there might be a couple more to clean up, but it looks like departments are going to spend most of the money that's outstanding right now. So those two may, and any unpaid bills, there might be some issues that I think we're looking maybe having a special town meeting later this year so we can clean up any of that at that meeting. So we're looking to maybe delete 10 and 11. The Finance Committee is asking to, I know there were numbers in there for 13 and 14 that were just placeholders. The Finance Committee was asking if we could do 100,000 into the Health Insurance Trust and 500,000 into the Stabilization Fund. So those numbers were added. The article, I think the rest of it is the same. I think we added an amount to the Fuller Field House article. I think in talking with the Community and Economic Development Director, who's done some of these studies before, he thought maybe somewhere in, 20,000, but not more than 30,000 range. So we kind of split the middle and put 25,000 in there. Article 28, Article 29 would be 25,000 for that study. Anything that's unexpended, obviously, would then close out as well. So I don't remember on the last one if I had Article 30 on there, which was for a dispatcher article in the event that at the executive session that we go forward with that agreement. If we do, then we need to have an article on to approve the contract on town meeting. It's for a 1-year retro contract, which will expire June 30th of 22. If that doesn't go forward, then we can eliminate that, but at this point, if that needed to be put on there, so that might be a new one. We did add the rail trail articles, or 2 articles now. So one is for the first grant, and then the second is for the second grant, which they just applied for this week for the extra $100,000. And I think most of the other ones were there. And just checking the citizen petitions to see if you moving forward with those as well too. So,
If we're potentially discussing the salary grid, would it be wise to hold off on this until later in the meeting, since Article 3 would we have to go back and take that off?
No, it does. Yep, I think it doesn't matter. It's just that this. I was just looking for approval of the warrant, subject to final language from the solicitor, hopefully tonight, because next Friday, in order to make town meeting publication, it would have to be in the item next Friday. They've pushed their deadlines back till Tuesday morning, and with the size of this document, they usually won't take it on deadline day. Okay. So I was hoping to send it to them by this Friday, to give them Friday, Monday, Tuesday to prepare it, to make sure we don't get closed out of the publication for next week. So that's why I was hoping just to have a final document. So whether it's right now or by the end of the meeting, we would just need approval. So.
Okay. And Mr. Kobus and I met with the budget subcommittee, and we talked about those 13 and 14. 14's more than we usually do, but we're in good position, and this would actually get us to, I think they like 5% of the budget.
Exactly. Yeah, Mr. Chair, we'd like to see both the bond markets and the Department of Revenue would like to see a healthy kind of reserves. They would like to see between 5 and 10%. We have been adding to that over the last several years and getting it up to a better rate than we were. We were very low in the past. So we're just shy of 5% right now. So that number would put us over the 5%. So which is great. Really kind of the first time that I can remember that we've hit that benchmark. So
right, and that, and combined with, our continued financial health and bond rating improvement, is just another testament to how hard the financial team here has been working to make sure we're heading in the right direction. I know there's some towns that are using that money to pay operating funds. So I just want to make sure everyone's clear on that. It's not just a number, it's a very good number for us. What's the pleasure of the board? Any questions about this discussion? Motion?
I'll make a motion, we put it off to later on tonight.
Okay. We'll come back to this. On to administrative business. The Corcoran House is requesting permission to close Walnut Street in front of their building on Wednesday, August 17th from 4 to 7 p.m. to host a barbecue dinner block party for the residents and families. There's a letter in the packet. What's the pleasure of the board?
I'll make a motion, we grant it pending right to Clinton and police and fire department are aware of it.
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed, 5-0. The Polish American veterans are requesting a one-day liquor license for June 18th, 2022 to allow the 75th annual Polish picnic to be held on the outside grounds of their facilities on Green Street. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion, we grant the one-day liquor license for the annual Polish picnic.
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all's in favor? Aye. Opposed? 5-0. The town solicitor has reviewed the draft agreement with the Clinton Area Little League to renew a lease that allows them to house a portable concession stand on town property located at Savage Field. There's a draft lease agreement enclosed in the packet. Any context on this, Mr. Gibbons, or?
It's the same license agreement that we signed back in 2018. It was a 2-year license agreement back then, expired in 2020. I don't think we had one from 2020 to the present because we probably have COVID, but essentially it's the same license agreement. It's for the concession stand. Contains the same provisions. So the only difference really is that the term now would expire September 30th, 2024.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? What's the pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion, we grant the lease agreement.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all's in favor? Aye. Opposed?
I'll recuse myself.
Abstain, 401. The Select Board has received a request from the Veterans of Foreign Wars for a one-day liquor license to allow use of their back parking area during a Memorial Day celebration on May 30th, 2022, that will be held at their facility on Allen Street. What is the pleasure of the board?
I'll make a motion, we grant the one-day liquor license.
I'll second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion?
Just to note that that came in today, that's why it's not on the agenda, it came in today,
Okay.
and the event is before the board's next meeting, so we're hoping the board would take it up tonight.
Thank you. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. On to old and new business. Members of the board would like to have further discussions relative to the non-union salary survey presented at our past meeting and endorsed at that time.
Mr. Chair.
Have at it.
Thank you. So first, I just want to let everyone know that, like, me and Selectman Kovas, I don't mean to speak for him, but we're not against this salary study. I mean, we've had a chance to review it. I agree with most of it, and I'd like to put something in front of the taxpayers that is actually going to pass. And in my opinion, and this is just my opinion to you guys, I don't think that this thing is going to pass town meeting the way that it's currently structured. And let me just go down a couple of things that I have issue with, and that's part of my concern from the last meeting, is that I just wanted to have a dialogue about this before. I'm not against it, all right? I just want to talk about it before we approved it, and we'll see how this goes.
Before you get into the dialogue, I just want to clarify that the board did vote, they approved this, so from a procedural perspective, you probably should take a vote to reconsider before you open up the board to having the same discussion again. Because right now, that the board at the last meeting voted to approve it as written, with those current salaries. So I think if you're going to open up the dialogue, which it sounds like you're going to do, the board has every right to do that. The board should take a motion, have a motion to reconsider the prior vote. That then opens it back up for further deliberations, and then you can take a new vote if you so choose.
Thank you.
Okay. I make a motion to reconsider the vote from last selectmen's meeting approving the proposal from Personnel Board salary study.
I'll second that.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none? Go ahead.
No, this is the discussion. Now I can talk.
So we're going to reconsider, then we discuss. If you want to talk about why you want to reconsider, that's fine, but
I just want to talk.
I understand.
Can I talk?
I understand. So that's all that's your discussion for this motion.
Yeah, we seconded. So now it's open for discussion.
Right, but we're not going to reconsider it, the thing. We're talking about whether we're going to reconsider. You want to reconsider. Ed, come on, you've been on this for a while.
This is
No,
insane.
I'm talking.
All we want to
I'm
do, we just
talking.
want to talk about this, Sean.
I understand, and that's your discussion. The reason you want to reconsider this is because you want to discuss it. And I'm going to support that because we didn't discuss enough last time. Okay? That's what we're talking about here. Then we vote. I know, democracy's sloppy.
No. I know, but I thought the second opens it up for discussion. I thought that's
Discussion
how it
on
works.
this motion to reconsider. And then we're going to reconsider, and we're going to talk about it some more. So I understand your discussion. Is there any other discussion on this motion to reconsider? Hearing none. All's in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
3-2. We're going to reconsider. Now we can talk.
Thank you. First concern I have with this study is that the spreadsheet that was presented to us, it was presented to us like the spreadsheet was the result of the Collins Center study. And when I had a chance to look at the study, I was surprised to find out that there is no official recommendation from the Collins Center. It's just they give minimum and maximum ranges, and it's the personnel board that decided on a lot of those numbers. So there's no recommendation in the study for a % increase on the initial one-time salary bump, which I don't have a problem with, but there was no recommendation for that. No recommendation on how to incorporate longevity. There was no recommendation to fast-track employees into the maximum step. Yet, I feel like these things were presented to the board as if they were the result of the study itself. And there's nothing in that study that remotely points to any of those things. Those are all personnel board decisions. The 2.5% one-time increase, which, again, I don't really have a problem with, but that was a number decided by you guys. And everyone in the existing steps already gets a 2.5% raise. So this 2.5% is only going to benefit the most senior employees. And this is just kind of it's a theme that I found the more I was looking into this, where the most tenured employees are benefiting a lot, and the people that are still in the scale are kind of getting the short end of the stick, because right now, so the proposal right now is to do 2% across the board, right, from 1 to 15. But right now, it's 2.5% for 1 to 9. So you're going to be asking the people from 1 to 9 to take a 0.5% cut to 2. And then you guys are going to, and then the 2% will go on from 9 to 15. So everyone that's getting a 2.5% step raise right now from 1 to 9 is going to be going down to 2. So it's like you're benefiting you're adding, value to the long tenured employees almost at the expense of the people that just haven't been here long enough. So I would actually like to keep the 2.5% to be the same from 1 to 9. And then go 2% from the new steps that were created. The biggest and the most concerning part of this proposal is the Personnel Board's wish to immediately bump all employees here over 15 years to the maximum step. No union that the schools don't operate like this. I've never heard of another union where you immediately bump someone up to the maximum step. If you add steps, if you're maxed out, you usually still have to, if you're at step 10 and you add 5 more steps, you have more steps, you have more opportunity to make money, but you go up 1 year. So the next year you go to 11, the next year you go to 12. Bumping someone up immediately to the max step, it creates these insane salary increases that are in this report. And this is why I think this is going to fail at town meetings, because unions are going to look at this and they're going to say, why are we arguing for 6 months and multiple meetings for 2 and 3% raises? And we're handing out with no discussion, we're handing out 25% raises. In one instance, a 60% raise. I know it's an aberration, but it's just math. Like these are really crazy raises. So that is really the only part of this study that I'm very much against. I'm for all the rest of it. Another observation is most of the positions at the existing pay scale, like even right now, they sit, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Ed has the floor.
I'm sorry.
Ed has the floor.
I'm sorry. Most positions in the existing pay scale land within the recommended range of this study. If you take a look at the left-hand column, a lot of them, even in the existing pay scale, it is right now. And if we endorse this study, 13 employees are going to fall outside the maximum end of the study's own recommendations. So those are my questions, my concerns with the Personnel Board's presentation. With the Collins Study Center itself, the only thing that I had a problem with was if you look at the study, and this is one thing I wanted to talk to you guys about, is the assistant town administrator is lower than the librarian. And that is not a knock on the librarian at all. But if you look at the grouping, it makes more sense for the librarian to be in that group that's below, and in my opinion, it makes more sense for the assistant town administrator to be in that one that's above. So I would recommend shifting those positions. Now, I do have some questions about the process itself. It does bother me that a meeting held on this, meeting with the Collins Center, happened at 12 noon. Not a lot of people can go to that and make that meeting. And it's an important study. People should have been allowed to come here and see it. It should have been held at a time where employees and members of the community can come to see the study and also see how the Personnel Board is interpreting the study. The other thing that really bothers me about this, I want to understand, it doesn't have to be tonight, I want to understand what the role the town tax assessor is playing in this study. I just don't, the town tax assessor, I don't understand how that role has anything to do with employee salary. And even to the point where he is sending emails to members of the select board to support the study and sending rather rude emails to selectmen that just wanted to, we didn't have a problem with it, we just wanted to talk about it. That's why we voted against it.
Understood.
I find that like totally unacceptable. Okay?
Understood.
Excuse me, I'm almost done. I'm really bothered. I want to know why the personnel board chair, why, I don't understand why an employee is not recusing herself. I mean, every time, if we talk about the schools, Matt has to recuse himself. Mike Jakonski used to recuse himself if they were talking about veterans benefits. But somehow, we have an employee as the chairman of the personnel board who's driving the study. I mean, it's no offense to you, Lisa, but that just seems, it's such a conflict of interest to have an employee driving this study. This is supposed to be an impartial look at what the salary is. And I just don't know how we're accomplishing that. I don't even feel comfortable discussing this with an employee. I would much rather discuss it with another member of the personnel board that's not a town employee. And my final concern with this is we're in the middle of contract negotiations. And like it or not, the personnel board they've now turned into the non-union bargaining unit for the town. That's not the way it should be. It's not the way the bylaws are written, but it's the way it is now. I think we should fix it, but that's the way it is. And I think if they're going to act like that, we should treat them as such, and we should have treated that presentation as an initial offer and something that we would talk to them about, possibly negotiate, and come to some sort of a common ground. And I just find voting to approve this without any discussion just was a slap in the face to every other union in this town that spends 6 months negotiating late night meetings, lawyers, and they're doing this to get 2% and 3%, and we pass something giving people's raises of 25% without even any sort of a discussion. So, we have a responsibility to be fair to all our groups of employees, and I just don't think that the way this is structured right now, it's fair to everyone. And it's really specifically, and the only thing I have a problem with mainly is just the fast tracking to the maximum step. If that was taken out of it, I mean, I would be fine with increasing the 1 to 9 to 2.5, and then have 10 to 15 be 2. And as long as people were not automatically jumping, because it's a crazy rate increase, and it's going to really hurt us when we start negotiating with our other unions. So I'm not against this study. All I want to do is table it to have a chance to meet with the personnel board once. I don't understand what the rush is to get this thing done. For God's sake, it took us 6 months to get a job description approved for the assistant town administrator. Why can't we take one meeting with the personnel board to just get a couple of questions answered on this before we approve it? I mean, we voted on this thing and none of us read the study. And when I read the study, there are some questions that I think need to be answered. So that is why I'm making the motion to reconsider. And I might have to help me with the procedural. If that passed, I would like to make a motion to table this vote until we get a chance to meet the personnel board and just ask them some questions about this.
She's going to be speaking for the personnel board. Is there a procedure to this? Can you just?
There's no set procedure. I mean, the board took a vote to reconsider. was passed and you're reconsidering. So reconsider means ultimately you're gonna take another vote again. Either you're gonna vote the same way you voted previously, or you're gonna vote differently. Table, the only issue I have with table it could mean you're never gonna decide, you're never gonna address it again. You may wanna continue it, but you continue it to a specific time, because really you have an obligation to take that vote again, because that's what a motion to reconsider is.
Right.
We already voted to reconsider it though, right?
Yes, which we are, but tabling isn't really reconsidering it. We could continue this discussion at another time.
Okay, but I thought tabling happens when there's a motion and a second, during the discussion. Isn't that when people table motions?
I guess we'd have to make a motion to.
But this is unique because the board took a vote. You approved something. Now you took the procedural step. You said, hey, we're gonna reconsider. We're gonna vote to see if the board wants to reconsider. The board voted, said yes, we want to reconsider because we want to do further deliberation.
Correct.
With the intent, we're going to take the vote again.
There will be a vote.
The vote that you took. So either.
But Bob, that was not my intent. My intent is to table
reconsider.
it. My intent is to table it.
I understand. But when we're reconsidering something, we're reconsidering that vote. So what we can do is you can make a motion to either approve or deny it, and then we can table that motion until a specific time.
Yeah,
you tell me, I'm not the lawyer.
Table means if you table something, technically you never have to address it again. You can vote to say you want to do more deliberations, so you want to vote to continue.
I want to try to get this passed before town meeting. All I want to do is have one meeting with the personnel board to discuss this.
So I would say table till the next Board of Selectmen meeting.
I'll make fine. I'll make a motion to table this until we get a chance to meet with the personnel board.
Can I ask what the personnel board is going to tell us that the chair can't tell us?
I want to meet with the whole board, Sean. And no, I've already been on the record.
But if the chair speaks for the board,
I'm not comfortable speaking with an employee about a study that she's directly benefiting from. I think that is wrong. I don't. So if I would rather meet with the entire personnel board and just ask these questions. What is the rush with this? I don't understand.
There's no rush. I'm trying to get this right.
So am I.
Please let me finish. If the chair speaks for the board, I guess we have a problem with how and town meeting approved an employee on this personnel board. So whether you like it or not, we have to have a town employee representative on there.
Correct.
I'm talking, and it's up to the personnel board to vote for who the chair is. There's no exclusion that person can't be chair.
No.
Okay. So I'm not sure what we're supposed to deal with here unless the chair recuses herself. We can't. Can we bypass the chair here?
No, it's a conflict of interest. If there is a conflict of interest, that's personal to the individual. I mean, they're under no requirement to recuse themselves if they don't think it's a conflict.
And it was a unanimous vote. Is that correct? It was 4-0. There was someone not there.
For the personnel board?
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay.
4-0.
Okay.
And can I just
Please.
comment on something? So, correct me if I'm wrong. Mary Rose purposely abstained or whatever. She didn't vote in that because she's running for selectman and she didn't want to.
Mary Rose was not present at that meeting.
Right, but wasn't her reason?
I don't think we can speculate on that.
Okay.
Did she tell you why she wasn't there? Okay.
Okay. Well, that was my understanding of it, and I'm just making the point. Like she doesn't even feel comfortable voting on this because she thinks she's going to be. I don't think we
can speak for her.
I mean, so I don't. Okay.
Listen, I don't feel comfortable speaking for her. If you want to, that's fine.
Fair enough. No, that's fine. But I'm making the point that it seems like everyone else in this government takes recusing themselves and takes conflicts of interest seriously, and and then we just have this, and I can't get it straight. Like I understand if the town at town meeting we voted to put an employee on the board, but there's got to be some things that they should be recusing themselves from. And how can you not recuse yourself from a study that you're directly going to benefit from? I just can't wrap my head around that. So like maybe that's something that we have to reconsider, and that's just my opinion. Obviously, it's not the opinion of the board, but I don't get it. I mean, I feel much more comfortable speaking with the board as a whole than I would with a chairman that's also an employee. I just find it to be a conflict of interest. That's all. And if you can overrule me, that's fine.
Understand.
I'm just noting it.
I can't tell you what to think.
Okay. All right.
Anything?
Is someone from the personnel board going to speak?
Yeah, I'd like to get our stuff out of the way first so they know what they're up against.
So then, As far as a conflict of interest, my time on the Parks and Rec Commission with Mr. John Baird, there were many times I had to recuse myself from conversations about Little League while on Parks and Rec. Mr. Baird is also a member of the Personnel Board. Did he vote that day?
Mr. Baird is not.
Oh, she's really, I know, it's hard.
No, Mr. John Baird, not Mr. David Baird.
Yes,
And he voted that day for this,
he did.
correct. So that would be.
Lisa, do you mind just at the mic, please?
So my question was, did Mr. John Baird vote for this, where there's a conflict of interest, meaning that a family member would be involved, they're involved in this stuff?
Okay.
So,
Anything else from our board?
so that's gonna go unaddressed?
She said you voted.
Correct.
Okay. Do you want me to address it, or? I don't
So is
know.
that not grounds for recusing yourself from when a family member is involved in a vote that impacts?
Again, I think the recusal is up
We
to the
don't make those
individual. I can't make
determinations.
anybody recuse themselves.
Individuals make those, and if an individual thinks that he or she may have a conflict, they can request an opinion from council, or they can call the AG's office, or things like that. It's not for the board to tell someone, or any board, to say, hey, you can't speak. If the individual in their mind thinks they don't have a conflict of interest, they can do that.
So
Hold on.
there's a conflict there with that, because I was advised by town council to remove myself from votes.
You sought an
that
opinion.
involve-
You
Correct.
actively reached out. What you did as an individual said, hey, do I have a conflict in this situation? We gave an opinion based upon that situation that, yes, you do have a conflict. That's not the case here. No one has reached out to my office regarding these conflicts that the board is bringing up right now.
Just, Mr. Chair, I mean, I've gone through ethical training for school committee and for selectmen. They talk about this a lot, about conflict of interest.
Yes.
So to make, I don't, so I mean, you're basically saying it's just up to the person to decide. If they don't think it's a conflict of interest, then it's not a conflict
That's
of
why you
interest.
go through that training, Mr. Duval, so you're aware of that. So if you think you have an ethical issue, you reach out to council. It's not for,
That's what's happening.
Okay.
No,
It
it's-
did- and so I think we're making it clear it didn't happen in this case.
didn't happen in this case.
Person didn't reach out.
No, I know, but this is me reaching out, okay?
But you can't recuse them.
Right.
I'm making the point. This is me, you're saying like, no one brought it to my attention. I'm at a public meeting,
But it's not.
voicing my, I'm bringing it to, this is my opinion. I don't think that this is, so,
Oh, no, that's
Right.
clearly stated.
okay.
You're,
I
yes.
I'm sorry, I have problem wrapping my head around the statement that it's only up to the individual to recuse themselves, because it makes it sound like if Matt wanted to, he could just vote on.
He could.
On teacher raises and stuff.
He
could.
He absolutely could.
He
Now,
could.
he could be exposing himself
It's not a
to
good
a conflict
idea.
of interest complaint from somebody.
Okay.
You couldn't make him recuse himself. Only the individual can recuse himself or herself.
Fair
And
enough.
if they think that they have an ethical issue, they can reach out. That's why you get the training.
Okay.
The training tells you, hey, here's the individuals you should reach out to and get an opinion on
Right.
whether or not you have a conflict.
Because there are potential consequences
I know.
to that.
The,
So,
the training gives examples of
yes,
conflicts of interest.
I think your
All right.
statement,
Okay.
we know
All
where
right.
you guys
Okay.
are
Okay.
on this.
All right.
So,
No, not yet.
go ahead, yeah.
Okay, so, again, completely in favor of having a salary study done frequently to make sure that we're paid, our employees are paid a fair wage. Secondly, the discussion took place under the non-union salary survey discussion. There are components of what was presented to us that had nothing to do with the non-union survey salary, okay? As far as the one-for-one step, the 1 year of service for one additional step prior to the scale being implemented. So, to me, I think there's kind of, what's happening, I think, for me, is that was kind of blended together. So the 2.5% was, as Mr. Devault said, that was proposed by the Personnel Board, not the recommendation of the Collins Center. The COLA was approved by the Finance Committee. So that last piece of having as Mr. Devault said, the fast tracking, that's a concern, because there's anytime steps have been added to any union contract, you have to go one for one. You cannot, regardless of longevity, you cannot go from the top step to the next top step because of your length of employment. So that seems to be the only factor that was included in that proposal by the Personnel Board. So I have a concern with that, because I think it sets up a very poor precedent. Secondly, we never have this report. So to have to take a vote that day without having any opportunity to go through, it really puts us in a position where now it looks like we're not supporting the town employees, which is not accurate. That's not true. So going through the Collins Center's recommendation, when we look at the minimum ranking, so I actually went through and I ranked everything based upon any market analysis that was provided, and I think that's where it comes down to, it's become subjective. What is a competitive pay, right? There's positions where we have the highest minimum pay per our market, and then there's also points where we also have the highest maximum pay per the market. Everything within the study fell in place of the recommended range. So I think that's where this, to me, to remove subjectivity, objectively, what are we looking to do? Are we looking to have our employees paid in the top 50 percentile compared to the market around us? That's a number that I think would have to be determined. So anytime we go to recalibrate, we have that number in mind, versus there's some people, even after these adjustments that I've made, they don't cross over, they're still ranked 7 out of 9 in the market. So while this study was meant to correct, or to ensure that it was, people are paid fairly, not everybody is seeing that movement. And I can understand why some of the people that have reached out had concerns about this, because unilaterally, it seems to benefit the longevity, the employees who have been here long term, which I'm not, I think completely in favor of adding 15 steps, 100%. But longevity should not be the only factor decided or included in that jump. If you've been here 15 years, I don't think that's enough to consider going from step 9 to step 15, which results in, as was mentioned, most of the percentage increases are 15 to 25%. Now, being part of a union and seeing other unions, that number, we don't even come close to that. No one comes close to that. So for an employee who is paid within what is recommended to receive a double-digit percentage increase, it's just not consistent with what I think the intention of this report really was supposed to be. Going back to the 2017 study, they made a correction, correct? You received a stipend. If you were vastly underpaid, you received a stipend to help catch you up. They established, is that correct?
It wasn't a stipend. It was exactly what we're doing on this, but it was based on a 2-for-1 process. So I'll give an example. If you were here 10 years during the other study, but you landed below that, you would take 10 years, you divide it in 2, 5, and you would shift by 5. In this case, so by implementing that the last time, we did do a study, but people felt as if, okay, and it was the first study in the history of the non-union employees. Prior to that, there was stagnation. There was no movement. There was no step system. And so there was employees, and I'll just use myself as an example because I'm here. At the time that study was done, I had been here 17 years. And at that time, unions were getting a step and a COLA and a step and a COLA and a step and a COLA, and the non-union people were not. And so if you look at the and I'm not comparing to unions, but
correct,
but you are, so I'll just make the comparison. If the non-union side was getting a fair shake, if you will, based on what the unions were getting, we wouldn't be here right now, because these positions would already have elevated to the positions of the comparable towns. But that wasn't the case. The grid stayed the same, and there was no step system. So you had 500 other individuals working for the town that were getting a step and a COLA and a step and a COLA and a step and a COLA, and it wasn't happening for these 60 people. And so as unions went like this, non-unions went like this, and here we are, because it's keep going. So in the history of the 21 years I've been here, this is the second time. You know, non-union people, and they're behind me today, we ask for nothing. We're invisible. We don't come to you. We don't negotiate every 3 years. Matt, in the time that you've worked here, you've probably negotiated 7 times. We are here for the second time in the history of non-union employees. And this is a market correction. When Collins Center goes out and they say, here are the minimums for what the market is paying for these communities, and here is what our people are out there in the market are being paid for their maximums, how do we say to the people that are at our maximum or maxed out, well, that's all fine, but we're going to put you back in mid-grid. We didn't feel as if that was the right thing to do. And I think that this is a market correction, and I think it was necessary. We looked at all options. We looked at doing absolutely nothing, taking the current salary, adding the 2.5, and then landing people wherever that was. That was option 1. Option 2 was what we did the last time in 2017. However many years of service you have, we'll divide that by 2, and we'll make that adjustment based on that factor. But you're always falling short. So as everybody else in the market and these other communities are moving, well, that's nice, but you're at the halfway mark because we're Clinton. People are just tired of hearing that, and this corrects for it. And so we went out, we did a study, a professional call-in center who has done this many, many, many hundreds of times, and they produced the results that they produced. When I did present it, and yes, it was short notice, and that's absolutely true, I did say to you that the recommendation from the call-in center was to give an initial 2.5% step, which we did do. We took that number, we plugged it into the new 15-step grid, and it was a policy decision that the personnel board made what type of adjustment we were going to make. No adjustment, a half adjustment, or a full adjustment based on years of service. We decided on the latter. And then the 2.5% COLA, which I did put in here as a placeholder because it was what we were granted the last year, which thankfully for the Finance Committee, they were starting to give the non-union people what the unions have been getting all along. So we've always gotten a lower COLA, and I think that this is a market correction given that, you know, had we been on par with the unions all along, we wouldn't be in this position. And this shift, just so you know, is a one-time shift. And so it's one time, get plugged onto the system. And I did talk to the Collins Center thereafter, and she had said, well, this is the process that we took, this is the vote that we took, this recommendation that we made, and I said, there are a few people that will max out. And she said, how many? And I said, maybe, 10 or 10 or 14, I'm not sure. She said, well, that happens anywhere. Anywhere you go in the market right now, in any of these towns, you're gonna find a small percentage of people that are maxed out. You have a large percentage of people right here maxed out right now. And so this gives an opportunity for growth. It gives a competitive wage on the way in so that we're not putting people further in the grade. But we want to be competitive on the way in, and we don't want to forget the employees who come and run this government day in and day out all year long, and all they are looking for is a market adjustment based on the data that was provided from the Collins Center, and I think that they deserve it.
Mr. Chair. No, I was still number one. Okay. So, I only want to look at this strictly as data. I'm not looking to make any interpretations. In a union, when they reach their top step, they only receive whatever that COLA
yeah.
or the base
Same here.
is,
Yep.
whatever it is. So there's employees in every union in town who are at the top step who are only receiving that percentage increase. So in the case of the employees that are non-union who have reached their top step, the non-union employees have received a COLA every year back to 2008, except in 2017 it has a study, and then it says there was a couple years where there was 0. but it was fairly consistent with what the unions were receiving. So it wasn't stagnant wages, it was based on whatever
COLA,
that COLA
yeah.
was. As far as a competitive and a fair wage, the Collins Center recommended range, when you look at FY '22 for the Clinton the salaries, they all fall within it, right? So to say that to say that they're underpaid, it becomes not according to the range. By opinion, possibly. But when I look at this and trying to just keep it strictly to data, even looking at that 5.25% raise, it still moves people within that recommended range. And some employees are already the first or the number one or the number two highest paid in their position for that market. Some employees are not. And I think that's where, when I looked at this, doing the one size fits all to it at the initial approach, it doesn't address the employees who are still going to be that 7 or 9. Right, the ranked 7 out of the 9. So I'm happy to share. I mean, I just went through and I just kind of ranked everything so you can see for yourself on the minimum, the maximum. But so I think that, again, I cannot support the numerous jumps. And like you had mentioned, no salary study had ever been done before. So it makes complete sense that would be applied at that time, because things were the employees were so far behind. So based on this study, it shows that we are within the recommended range. So I don't know that necessarily, in my opinion, that a multi-step jump is required. That's my opinion, and I'm not going to beat a dead horse.
So a few things with the library, just to clear the air on some of these things. The classifications and the recommended grades were all produced by the Collins Center. Mm-hmm. The library is required a master's degree, and with a master's degree, the point system goes up for a required master's degree, and that's a required master's degree. And she was very clear about that's why the library position was where it was, and I'm not going to argue with her opinion on that. In terms of a conflict of interest, understood. I felt many years back that the personnel board at the time, sometimes they met, sometimes they didn't, and it's a very hard, difficult position to fill because it's nobody wants to do it. And I think for the employees, they felt as if you have 5 people who don't represent the employees because they never speak to them. They don't know them, they don't ask them any questions. And so it became a board that was completely irrelevant with regard to the employees. And I think that having an employee on the board is fine. I never intended to be the chair, and unfortunately I'd love to have Mary back, and I would love for her to still be the chair, but not the case. In terms of conflict of interest, I understand your point. However, I'm here representing 60 people. I'm not here representing myself. I'm here representing 60 non-union individuals who work hard for the government side. And I am not a high recipient on this, contrary to what's been out there, that this is a spreadsheet that's been produced by myself and others. It is not. These are strictly a mathematical equation based on the classification in years of service. And every individual that is on here using the same formula. And so there's no picking and choosing. There's no winners and losers that have been picked by the personnel board. It's strictly the math. Whether you like the math or you don't like the math, it is what it is. And every calculation on here is based on the same. 2.5%, then shifted based on years of service in the position, and then a COLA. And however that shakes out in the end, yes, there is a great disparity on who gets what in the end, but it's based on classification and years of service. And so does it benefit some of the higher aged employees? It does, and I'm not saying that that's a wrong approach. I don't feel that it is the wrong approach. In terms of Ed's point regarding the tax assessor, in 2016, when the last study was produced, the outcome for the personnel board at that time was that they were going to not shift at all for longevity. So I'll just give an example again. It's me. In that study, I was here 17 years, and my pay landed me on step 1. And so had I quit my job that day and you hired somebody 2 weeks later, you would have been hiring them at the exact same pay that I was being paid after 17 years. And so I had advocated for the personnel board to make some adjustments on that. They said, absolutely not, we're too busy, we're not going to do it. And so the Board of Selectmen at the time, courtesy of Mr. Selectman Conley, he took this up and he worked with the tax assessor to actually create an implementation process for the employees. And the tax assessor, produced the 2-for-1 process. And so he has all the data from that process. He has all the employees, he had their hours, and their rates of pay at the time, and he was instrumental in getting the employees having that study implemented. And that was basically, Dave Baird did that all on his own, and thankfully Bill Conley pushed it and get the Personnel Board and the Board of Selectmen to implement it. Otherwise, we would be very, very, very behind the 8 ball. But thank you to Bill Conley and thank you to Dave Baird for doing what he did back in 2017. And that is the answer to that.
Mr. Chair?
Yep.
It still doesn't answer the question. All you said was he was involved in the previous study.
So
That
with
doesn't,
it,
excuse me.
Okay. What do we get here?
She
Please.
talk, I talk, she talk, I talk, right?
Go ahead.
It doesn't answer the question. He was involved in the study last time.
Correct.
Doesn't really answer the question of why the tax assessor is involved in an employee salary study. Could it just as well been the head of the DPW or the director of economic development?
It could have been, but it wasn't.
Right, but like his role as a tax assessor.
What was his role?
So the point of Dave being involved in this study was he had a lot of data already produced from the last study. Who are our employees? What is their rate? What is their, when were they hired? There was a lot of, Dave has that database already. When the Collins Center sent this form to me, this was not like this. This is a lot of data. And I spent countless, and I mean countless hours, nights and weekends to get this accomplished for the 60 individuals that are here. There's a lot of paperwork, there's a lot of data involved in here, and it's very difficult for one person to manage the paperwork, get the hours, drill this all down, and implement into the database. And so without Dave's involvement, this wouldn't have happened either. So yes, he is high on the scale and he is a recipient of this as well as I am, but this is strictly utilitarian for him to be involved because he had the data previously, and I had to put a lot of time and effort into getting these current employees, what is their hours, what is their pay, get all the numbers here. And if you haven't realized, he is basically the town mathematician.
You have a personnel board. It's the personnel board's responsibility to do these activities. Pulling in another employee into the fold to do this study. I mean, I've already been very vocal about the fact that I have a problem with conflict of interest of, like, you being the chairman of the personnel board. Now, pulling in another employee to answer the question to say, well, because he was involved in the last time we did the study, it doesn't answer the question. I still have the same question. Like, it just doesn't, I understand that he was involved, but it doesn't mean that it's correct or right or appropriate or ethical for an employee to be involved in something like this.
It doesn't mean that it's not.
Go ahead, one at a time.
I know. In the fact that you just noted, that does concern me. He has one of the highest bumps in that study. And he's very much involved in the study. He's emailing selectmen, asking for our support, which I find to be totally inappropriate. And like I said before, he's emailing selectmen after the meeting that didn't vote in favor of it, giving them a hard time. I find the whole thing to be completely inappropriate.
Okay.
And I still don't understand, and I still don't have an answer to the question of why he is so involved in these studies.
I think she answered the question. You may not like the answer.
Yeah,
No,
you may
I
not.
don't think it's an
One
answer.
at a time.
Ed.
You might, no,
Yeah.
that's the answer she
Yeah.
gave.
It's not an answer though, Sean. It's not an answer.
Okay. Do you wanna try again?
To say why is someone involved in the study, and then you just say, well, because they were involved in the study the last time.
That's
not
the
an
answer.
answer. That's not
Ask
an
an
answer.
answer. That's
Then
what
why
I'm
were they
saying,
involved in
it's
the
ask an
the first
answer.
time?
Okay, then you don't like the answer. I don't know what to tell you.
Not an answer.
Okay,
The answer to your question is,
I got this. Thank you. Okay, asked and answered. We're moving on to that one. If you want to file an ethics violation complaint, that's what we're moving on to here, is what you're talking about.
Sure.
She answered the question. It might not have been, just like not recusing yourself, might not have been a smart decision. These are the decisions we're stuck with. So what you want to do with those decisions, we can't go back. She answered the question.
I have one further
Go ahead.
point on that, just so that
We're
there's.
kind of
there's-
retreading here, so let's.
I know. I have one further point, is just because an individual is involved in producing the data does not in any way, shape, or form mean that the data is manipulated. And if you are in any way suggesting that, you're flat out wrong. You may not like me, you may not like him, you may not like anyone behind me, but it doesn't
Let
matter.
her finish.
It doesn't matter. The data is the data, and it is produced using the same formula for every employee on here. Me, him, and the other people behind me. You may not like it, but that doesn't matter.
Okay, that's covered. Asked and
Okay.
answered.
And first of all,
Yeah, I'm gonna get you.
One thing, don't allow her to say that I have a problem with everyone in here. I find that to
You
be
can say you don't.
completely offensive.
Let the record state he doesn't have a problem with that.
I have specific issues with this study, and that is not one of them. I want this thing to pass town meeting, and I'm telling you guys, if this goes before town meeting the way it is, every union member, every brother, sister, relative, friend is going to show up to that town meeting, and it's going to be defeated. And I don't want to see that happen. I got a problem with the max stepping to the jump to the maximum.
We covered this,
you know,
right?
Yeah.
All right,
totally
I'm just going to give
problem.
someone else a chance. but-
Sure. Can I just? And I'm going to shut up for the rest of the night.
No, it's okay, just new stuff.
The cost of living thing. I just want to reiterate something because
So not new, but go ahead, quickly.
because the cost of living adjustment has been in place for a number of years. So I just to say that things have been completely stagnant, I don't find to be
Understood.
totally accurate. And yeah, guys,
We got
it.
I'm in favor of this.
My turn.
I'm gonna
in
give
favor
someone
of
else a
this.
chance
I
here.
just don't like the jump to the max step. That's
Ms.
the only thing I don't like.
Clear. Ms. Prus.
Okay. So we've talked about two studies, the one in 2017 and this one. I am new here, so bear with me, but is the only way to like negotiate a raise is to do it as a group? Is that, what are like our processes or mechanisms to do so? Because you've given some examples, and I'm kind of thinking like, as we've said, like, we obviously can't go backwards. I'm thinking more like, how do we avoid this in the future? Because this is obviously not a great scenario. So like, what is the only way to go and negotiate with the personnel board, or could you just
So
maybe elaborate?
prior to the study, and I think one of the reasons that the previous study took place was that it was a free-for-all. And so there was no real way to move on unless you but we didn't really have a grading system. There was literally no system. So if you said, I want a raise, you would just kind of be picking it. I'm not even sure if the hierarchy or the grading system is new.
So
you know.
as of 2017, it was new?
I believe so. I think there was a grid, but there was no grading system. And so the grading system that took place in 2017, I don't know if you've ever looked at it, it's a long 27 grades where you have 2 people on one grade, 2 people on another, and the approach that this center took was, rather than have departments and employees say, why are they on 15 and I'm on 16, when the money between the two was so small that the groupings actually make sense. And so you have like departments grouped together the way that they are now.
So is the only way to get an increase is to do a study? Like, it feels like you said this is kind of like an opportunity. I'm not questioning the study, I'm just trying to see like the future, like where this, like what the process is. Like this puts us at an opportunity for growth, and that other groups will do like step one COLA, but like what do we do here?
I think that, so for instance,
Yeah.
if there's an individual on here that feels as if they are not classified in the right group, then they would come to the personnel board and say, hey, you know, I'm open to this.
So they don't go to their supervisor? Like they don't go to their department head?
Yeah, I mean,
trust, I'm like,
Yeah.
come from a private sector, so
I mean, I think
mine's
that-
more like meritocracy. You saved us money, you've hit your goals, you get a raise versus you've been here 20 years. So I'm just trying to like get a better understanding.
So we don't have merit pay.
Yeah.
I know it's in the bylaw, but it's never really been adopted. I mean,
Okay.
it's something we can consider. But at the moment, it's basically you're moving along the grid with the COLA, which is, you know, kind of a new system. If any individual on here feels that they're not classified correctly, you know, they move into a different bracket. I mean, it'd have to be justified and authorized by the department head, and they can come to the personnel board and say, hey, you know, we've done our research, and, you know, the 12 towns that we used. And for instance, I'll use the veterans. If the data that the Collins Center provided is inaccurate, I would absolutely welcome him to get that data and come to the personnel board and say, you know what, this was wrong, or I'm doing this, this, and this, and I'd like to be reclassified from E to F. That's an open process, and we would absolutely welcome him to do that, or any employee who felt that way. But the answer isn't always, yes, we'll do that. There has to be a justification, and not all jobs are created equal. I mean, my job isn't the same as the executive assistant, who isn't the same as a department head, who isn't the same as Michael. I mean, there is a pecking order, and that's, you know, that's the nature of positions. But certainly it's an open process for people to come and get reclassified.
Yeah, but Mr. Chair, just to add though, as part of the process though, it is pretty stoic, you know. You do get classified, you're in a grade, and you start at your step and you just move through. So unless you do a market study or a survey or relook at those, it's just individuals. So it's one department will just come up and say, well, I think this employee should be changed. And then another department says, I think this employee would be changed. Then it would go to the personnel board. So, but to be fair, throughout the system, by looking at a study, you get to look at all the positions and not just the one-offs here and there. So we don't have the merit pay. And early on in the system, that was a problem, was there wasn't a step in COLA. It was only a step. And when you maxed out, you may get a COLA if you maxed out. So it was one or the other. You didn't get both. And then what was happening was the beginning step wasn't changing. So for 10 years, that first step stayed the same. So 10 years later, you're trying to recruit for a position at step one that was 10 years old. So this study in the 2017 study, at least it tried to correct some of that, and it was just a start. But I don't think it was able to really fully get us where we needed to be at that time. So they said every 3 to 5 years, you should look at it again. So that's what this study is doing here. So I think by periodically looking at it, I think is the only way to be fair to the whole organization. Otherwise, you're just having the one-offs of, oh, this department's going to come in and try to help this employee, but it's not hitting the whole hierarchy.
And this is how other municipalities do it as well? Like this is common
This is common
industry
practice. The
practice?
Collins Center does this. There's a few other organizations, and in her research and in some of mine, I mean, Lunenburg is doing it as well. Northborough in the process of doing it. So this is the process that people use. And I think to Michael's point is, rather than do it onesie, twosie, and it makes it complicated, we want to be fair. These are the communities that we're being measured against, and we want every position to be measured against the same communities, so that somebody isn't coming in saying, well, I want to use Concord and Sudbury and Acton, and we say, no, that's not who we are. We're trying to be fair with who we are in the towns that we picked. We know we're not the highest level communities, but we know that we're progressive. We know that we're lean staff. You know, these people do a lot with a little. And Sean, I think we even talked a little bit about that. There are departments in other communities that have, you know, infinite amount of people more than what we have here. And so I think that this does correct for the market. It puts people where they belong in the scale. And just for reference, just to make a point, you know, we have some people that are reclassified. I won't give names, but when they get reclassified, if we don't make any type of shift, you'll be putting an 8-year employee on step 1, or a 4-year employee on step 1, or, you know, a 10-year employee on step 6. Like, if these towns came back with their mins and maxes, those are real people doing those jobs, making that money. And how do we say to our maxed people, that's good for them, but it's not good for you? We're going to keep you back here because that's what the unions do. Well, we don't get the fair shake that the unions do. We don't get paid on 40 hours. We don't get stipends. We don't get longevity. We don't get a lot of the things that unions get, and we don't ask for them either. We're very quiet. We're very patient. We don't get in the way. We don't ask for a lot. And this is the second time in the history of this town that they're asking for something, and I think you should approve it.
So just, you had just touched upon employees that are, say, at a higher step, that are, when this classification goes through, they're gonna actually be on a lower step, but the money is this, will be the same, right? So even though step 4 is less than step 9, the dollar amount of step 9 is equivalent to the dollar amount of step 4.
I lost you. What?
So it was actually what I emailed you about that day. So where you had mentioned that if someone is a step 9 and we accept this classification, that person may go down to a step 6, but the dollar amount for step 9 and step 6 are equivalent. So it's not that the person's losing money.
Do you have an example? I just don't know what
It's any...
Give me an example of something.
So, all right, so for example, let's say library director.
Okay.
Library director, no, that's not a good example. But either way. So the point being is, just because someone's going to a lower step on the new scale, the amount of money is equivalent to what they're currently making. That's all I'm saying.
You're talking about the migration from the old scale to the new scale?
New scale.
Yes.
So, exactly. So
Yeah.
if they go from a step 8 to a step 6, it's not that they're losing money.
It's totally
the same.
irrelevant because the grid is so much different. It's
The
double.
money is different,
It's
yes.
double. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
So this touches upon what Selectwoman Peruse had said. I'm in full favor of, again, not that I'm advocating to pay people in the middle of the road. That's not what I'm looking for, right? I think the personnel board, if there was a way to come up with where do we want to see our town employees paid, and where we plan on doing this study every 5 years, if we say we want to be, again, in the top 30 percentile, then at least when we get this data back, we know where we're trying to move to. So the employees who are already paid in that percentile, that's a competitive wage. The people who are outside of that, we know that we have to move them inside of that, and then every 5 years,
I mean, I think that this, like, when we did the first study, we really didn't make a full implementation. It was a half mark. I think if you do this and you look at the numbers, we're there. And so, what's going to change in 5 years? I think it's even too small of a time to even say that we're going to do this all over again in 5 years. I don't want to do it in 5 years, but I think it's too early to do that. Maybe a quick market thing, but hopefully with the 15-year grid, that this is going to last a long time.
And that's literally the final thing that I'm going to say about this is, I'm in favor of I support the reclassification with all the positions. I am in favor of the 2.5% step before they go to the new scale. I'm in favor of the 2 3/4 COLA. I'm not in favor of the 2-for-1. And so everything that the Collins Center recommended, I'm in favor of. I'm just not in favor of that 2-for-1 step. So I just want to be clear.
This isn't 2-for-1.
I'm sorry.
It's one. Yeah, it's 1-for-1.
One for one. So that's the proposal of the personnel board. That's the only thing I'm not in favor of. I'm in favor of.
Can I just ask you a further point to that?
Sure.
are you in favor of any longevity shift at all if it wasn't a one-for-one? Are you just not in favor of any shift, or are you just not in favor of a full shift?
Hold on.
I would say I'm not in favor of a multi-step in 1 year. I would not be in favor of. I would be in favor of, like you had mentioned, the longevity pay. If there, I don't know how that gets implemented, if that's even a possibility. I'm open in whatever needs to happen. I think taking care of employees who have been here for many years, who have invested in the community, 100% I'm in favor of taking care of them. Just not in that format of the one-for-one. Now, I tend to be reasonable and flexible. I'm not opposed to discussing, alternatives to that,
Just want to make one further point about
Yep.
the shift, just quickly.
Yep.
That shift is one time. So that number that you see there that is, 136, if you will, that's just once, and then it's done. People are placed where they are, and then from there, they're either maxing with the COLA or they're in the step system like they would be anyway. But that's one time to make the market adjustment. And then they're moving forward with the COLA and the step if they're entitled to it.
To your question, I would say yes. I would be open to more than one step per year in some fashion.
As would I.
Okay.
I'd totally be in favor of like somewhere meeting in the middle if that was a possibility.
Just to be clear, you're still in the minority here, so I'm not sure how we're doing this, because
the majority, because we voted to reconsider, so.
Yeah,
We're the majority.
we're still the majority.
I understand. No. I voted last time after looking at the numbers, and I think there are some optics issues here at the very least. But if the people who maybe, in some people's opinions, had recused themselves, it's still 2-0 on the personnel board. I don't know if we didn't have, Mary Rose didn't vote, and if, say for example, people who had any kind of conflict of interest took themselves out, it was still 2-0 in favor, correct?
Don't you need a majority?
Yeah? Okay, so I'm just not sure what the personnel board,
Can I throw something out?
oh, yeah? Because there's still 3 of us here. Yeah?
What if we made an agreement that we could meet with the personnel board to come up with, see if there's any.
I guess what I'm saying is that if the personnel board's not willing to reconsider this, then I'm not sure. We're not going to get together just to yell at people because they didn't recuse themselves. You should take that up with Maureen Healy.
No, I'm not. That has nothing to do with it. All I'm saying is, if we made the commitment that if we were to meet to talk about, like Ms. Prophet had mentioned about the being open to a multi-step in a year, could we make the commitment that if we meet, we'll vote at our next select board meeting?
Too late.
Oh, it's too late?
No, I mean, we could keep it on the warrant and just scratch it. I don't know how open to this the personnel board is, so.
Yeah, well, the warrant is just to accept the grid. So if you're good with the steps and grades, that's all that the warrant is doing. The implementation's a policy decision, so, excuse me, so that can still go forward, so.
If the personnel board's not interested in changing anything, then we're stuck with what we have, or we reject it.
How do we know that unless we ask the person who?
I don't know.
Ms. Prophet is the one that she raised the possibility, so I'm assuming that there's some level of compromise.
I wouldn't make that assumption, but.
I just wanted to hear Matt's answer, to be honest with you.
I'm happy, listen, I would like to get this right, because it seems like both on our board and maybe at other steps, maybe we could have handled this better. I think we all want the same thing. I just don't know how we're going to get there, and I don't disagree with Ed that, there's some people who don't like this. So how do we, and I'll take responsibility for last meeting and the lack of discussion. Then we could have talked a lot about it at that point. I just don't know if we're just gonna meet again and the personnel board's not gonna change it, then we can vote to, yes or no now. If we wanna hold off until the next meeting, go ahead, what? I'm hearing mumbles, go ahead.
I'm saying,
Speak up.
just give it the old college try. It's not the worst. The worst that they say is no, and then we vote on it.
He's not gonna
and
let
then
you,
it's-
what do you want us to do?
So what, I don't.
We'll step away from the personnel board for a moment. We had a meeting here yesterday, subcommittee. None of this was mentioned to us, not even a heads up.
I didn't get any
This
heads up
was
until
gonna
tonight
happen.
either.
And I'm saying, we meet every month, and we do a good job doing it. And if any one of you people were there, you were a ghost, because you've never been to a meeting unless you wanted something for yourself or somebody else. It never happened. And if you want to go to our meetings, you come to our meetings. We're deliberating on these things, trying to get it through. This is the way it started. Maybe I was a second year. No,
She's speaking
let me
clearly.
finish.
Please be
I was
quick.
a second year finance committee. The personnel board had quit in mass, and they didn't have anything. And I mentioned to the head of the finance committee, we should have somebody on there, and he pointed, you're on here. And we put this thing together the first time, did it, was supposed to be reviewed, it wasn't, and this is why we get into these messes, because nobody follows through. I know you guys have different people on the board, but there's somebody should have a memory that says, hey, wait a minute, aren't we supposed to do this in 2020 or 2021 or 2018, whatever it happens to be, and you don't. And then you get yourself in the hole deeper, and this is what you end up with.
Okay, thank you. Seems that we're at an impasse.
I mean, is there any direction from the board as to what you're going to revote tonight, or what?
No,
what it?
I think two members of the board would like to reopen this up, but it's the personnel board's decision. So I don't know what kind of negotiation.
Well, what's going to happen after now? Like, are you, if the personnel board, if I just say we'd like to just keep the current proposal on the table, what are you doing next?
Well, then we'd reconsider. We voted to reconsider, so I guess we'd reconsider tonight.
Okay.
If we're not going to open it up again. Then
Yeah, if the option of tabling it, requesting a meeting with the personnel board is not on the table. I mean, that's what we're asking, is to have one meeting with the personnel board, just to see if we can come to a common agreement on this.
It seems like they're turning us down.
And so
Excuse me.
I didn't hear an answer.
Go ahead.
Mr. Ward, so when you had mentioned voting at town meeting to implement the steps, would that include the process on how it would be implemented, so the 2.5% in there plus the multi-steps for longevity? Is that part of that vote?
No.
Well, no. All this vote is just to accept the new grid as part of the personnel bylaw. That's all. And then there would be a vote on the budget to fund whatever implementation is decided, by the final.
Yeah,
Right, we have to.
I was gonna, just so the board's clear, so I think it's Article 3 in the draft right now, the new Article 3. That would be, if the town meeting approves that, they're just approving the new 9 classifications, 15 steps. That's it. There's not gonna be anything where people are placed, existing employees are placed within that new grid. They would just be approving that new compensation plan or grid under the personnel bylaws. That's all that article is. Where those individuals are placed within the new grid, that's in the budget. That's going to be in every department budget. You know what I mean? So that's where it's going to be impacted. So that's what has to. So the article can get approved, right? In other words, they approve the new grid, but then where do individuals get placed in that grid? That's built into each department's budget because that's where their salaries are.
So as far as policy that the personnel board creates, once they approve the policy, then there's no checks and balance for that in terms of...
Well, the checks and balance there, once they come up with the grid, then the personnel board administers that grid going forward. The grid gets approved at town meeting. That's administered by the personnel board under the personnel bylaws. But where the checks and balances, every year there's a budget. It's got all the employees that fall in the personnel bylaw in that budget,
And you can look at their salaries and say, whoa, how's their salary? Are they in the right place they're supposed to be in the grid? Yeah, that's how it gets approved. So right now, you can't lose sight of the fact that if you approve the grid, but then don't somehow disapprove where folks fall into that new grid, that's gonna impact, it's not one vote, that's the entire budget. It's gonna impact most departments' budgets, because most non-union employees work for different departments. So every one of those budgets are gonna change.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, so what would be voting on a town meeting would just be the grid, and at any point in time in the future, the personnel could amend their policy and their structure on how they put people into the steps?
Well, I would recommend if you're just gonna approve the grid, you should approve it effective when? If it's effective July 1, then folks should be classified.
No, I know, but my specific question is, if we approve the grid, like Mr. Ward said, and there's no mention in that town meeting vote of like where people are gonna be placed in the steps, right? I'm saying like at a future 6 months from now, if the personnel board met and they decided that they wanted to make a change to that grid system, do they have the right to do that?
No, they can't change the grid system.
Well, excuse me, I misspoke. Not the grid system, but like where people get, let's say for example, the hot topic of the night, the bumping directly up to the max step, right? That's a personnel board policy decision. Right. That's not getting voted on at town meeting, correct?
It's subject to appropriation. So town meeting, a warrant article, town meeting, that warrant article is not going to approve that.
Okay.
But their policy decision is still subject to appropriation. So
it's in the budget.
Then it has to be funded. So that's where you have the authority with the selectmen and the finance committee to fund those line items to implement that decision.
Okay, so if a change was made, it would have to be made and then...
We have to pay for it.
It would have to be changed at the following, at another town meeting.
Exactly.
Okay, all right.
What would you like to do?
Not what we did last time, where we vote without having a discussion.
I think we had ample discussion.
No, I would just like an answer if the personnel board is willing to meet with us. If they aren't, that's their right. And in the spirit of collaboration, I think it would be fair to everyone to take one shot at trying to find an agreement that everyone's happy with. Right now, I agree with everything in this presentation with the exception of that fast track to the max step. So if we're willing to meet someplace in the middle, I'm willing to have that discussion, and I feel much more comfortable about the chances of this passing at town meeting.
Okay. And I'm willing to, if you want to, could we give them time to think about this and just put it on the next, we could just hold off on this?
Yeah, you don't have to, you can continue the
Okay. If you want to think about this.
I don't think I need to think about it.
Okay.
I think that we did the study. I think that years of service for the employees, I mean, when we say fast track to the max step, there's a reason for it. It's based on years of service. And so if somebody is put on step 7, that's because they're here 7 years. If somebody is on 10, it's because they're here 10 years. If somebody is on 15, it's because they've been here 15, 20, 25, 35 years. And so that's the process. And that's what we're presenting, and that's what we'd like to continue to present to you.
Okay.
And I know that that's never happened in any other union, correct? It's outside of the precedent.
Yes, she just said it. Yep.
All right, yeah, I'm still not against that. I'm against that. I still don't think that's understood.
Well, the thing too is I feel like this was an incredible waste of time, only because we're only talking about approving the class. Like I'm for the classification, for the scale. I thought this was all tied together. I didn't realize that we're essentially been talking about a policy that we have no control over. So I apologize for.
But it will be tied into the budget that will be voted on. Right.
Yeah, but it's already been financed by FinCom, so it doesn't.
I just can't in good conscience approve something that gives people increases in their salary this high, 25%, 40%, 60%, when we're going to be negotiating with unions. It's gonna put us in a bad position. That's the only reason that I'm against that.
Okay.
And I understand one further point.
Yeah, we're just going over the same thing.
These are non-union folks. They never negotiate.
Yep, we
They've
covered all that,
Never
too.
been
Yep,
before you.
yep. All
and
that's- this
it's-
is all on the
and-
record.
And
It'll
the
be in-
shift is based on years of service, and that is it.
Got it.
So thank you very much, and we'd like your support.
Thank you. What's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion that we keep Article 3 on and we'll negotiate down the road.
Is that sufficient?
Yeah, I mean, you can vote Article 3, which means you're approving the new grid, which is the 9 classifications, 15 steps. But, you know, how people get classified in there and how the flows out in the budget, that's separate. That's the budget.
Well,
Article 3 is separate.
Uh-huh. Okay, that's a motion. Is there any second?
Are we just
Am I doing this
that
again?
article?
Just getting the article on, that's it.
Awesome, fool me once.
Michael, could you just restate the article, like
Or do we
what's
need
it
to approve
actually
the-
voting on? Just voting on the approval of the grid.
Voting on Article-
It's a motion to
article.
accept
Is that
the
what we
new
did
grid
last
as presented by the Personnel
Yeah.
Board.
So you're just voting on acceptance of the new 15-step grid with 9 steps?
Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, what did we vote on last time?
Fine.
Let's just focus on this time, because
Well,
last
I'm
time
just
didn't go so
trying to-
well.
Okay.
We're reconsidering, so there's a new motion, which is fine. Again,
Is this to reconsider, to just vote to reconsider, and then we're voting again?
there's a new motion to accept the salary grid
Okay.
as presented by the Personnel Board. The budget is a separate thing, which, again, I don't know if we want to crack that open again, because we've had no problem with the budget up until now.
Right, just put Article 3 on.
Yeah, that's all that we're looking for the warrant, is to approve the grid. That's what we're looking for.
Fine.
Now, do they need to vote on the vote that was taken at the previous selectmen meeting? If they reconsidered that vote, and now they're changing the motion of that vote?
Well, in essence, the vote that you took the last selectmen's was kind of, you somewhat approved both, because you had the numbers in front of you too, and those numbers are already in the budget. I mean,
Right.
the numbers for this Article 3, which we're calling Article 3 from the draft, which is the new grid, the numbers for the employees, existing employees, those numbers right now, my understanding, are already built into the budget that's been approved by the Finance Committee. So the grid numbers are in there. Now, I know there's some of you have issues with certain aspects of those numbers, but those numbers are already in the budget. My understanding is the Finance Committee has approved that budget. I don't know if the board has approved that budget yet, but if you have, that ship has sailed.
We vote to reconsider.
Yeah, you have to, that's what you would have to do.
Just kidding.
Okay, there's a motion on the table. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion made and seconded to approve the salary grid as presented by the Personnel Board. Okay, the budget, we can burn that bridge when we get to it, but again, we haven't had any opposition to the budget. We met on Tuesday and looked at the numbers, so,
Well, in fairness, we didn't really know, I didn't know that was a process, but I'm not
understood.
going back.
And I'm probably gonna vote against only because I'm still unclear as to what the connection is between, so, I am in favor of the grid. I have no problem with the grid. Everyone knows what I'm not in favor of. I'm probably gonna vote against it because I'm just not sure about this connection between the two.
But just for clarification,
Okay.
if you vote the grid down,
Yeah.
but keep the budget the way it is, the
still
budget's
goes-
got the new grid numbers.
Yeah.
okay.
I
There's a
just want
motion
the
made
board
and
to make
seconded.
sure that they're clear here. In other words,
Yeah.
the budget has these new grid numbers in there. So
Sure.
technically, if you were to vote this new grid, you
Right.
reverse your vote, you vote this grid, the new grid down, it almost begs, I would question, why aren't you then looking at the numbers that are in the
Okay,
in
let's,
the
let's,
budget?
let's
Gotcha.
focus on this one.
I
There's a
appreciate
motion,
the clarification.
motion made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all's in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
And any abstained? Did you oppose?
I raised my hand.
4-1.
3-2.
No.
No, he
Whoa.
voted with you.
Four to one.
I'm in support of the grid.
Thank you. Sorry.
I did not jump ship. I'm in support of the grid
I like hearing.
and the classification.
Thank you. Listen, I know this went a long time, but I'm making up for past sins, so I wanted to make sure this get out there. And again, if we want to talk about the budget, we can, but, you know. I think the lesson learned for the kids watching at home, and go to bed because it's late. If there's any kind of conflict of interest, any kind of close, please just step back. It's not worth the trouble.
And make sure you read the report before you vote.
Okay. Yep, and I did. Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Next up, the Select Board will initiate the next round of employee personnel evaluations, beginning with the Town Administrator. Mr. Coas?
So, based on the new timeline that we have come up with, Mr. Ward's evaluation, we discussed about maybe doing, May 15th.
I'm sorry.
Hold on.
Can we just give it like a minute here?
Can I call a 3-minute recess?
Yeah.
Just tell them to get out.
I thought we were gonna get those boards fixed.
You're going to
I thought
go.
my first meeting, we said we were gonna get those boards fixed.
Thank you. So, please continue.
So with Mr. Ward's evaluation, the date was April 15th, so.
Wait, 5:15 or?
I'm sorry, 5/15. May 15th.
Yep.
That we would, between now and next meeting, we look to complete the evaluation individually and have
Yep.
it to you by, I think it was by like when,
Do we have the forms for?
the form, Michael did send the forms out.
Okay.
Yeah, we gotta get,
we'll get a
Select
hard
Board on
copy.
hard copy.
Okay, great. So what do we want to, let's look at the calendar, and the idea is for me to, in the absence of a HR manager, I will compile the results
Yeah,
and
so
do
it's
an
to
executive
get
summary.
it to you by, say, like next Thursday, so then you have a few days to compile it, and then we could present it at the following select board meeting, possibly.
Well, then, we've got the first. Yeah, I mean, do people think they can get that taken care of and back in a week? Or do we want to?
I'm fine with whatever, whatever timeline people need.
Okay.
Yeah, but for the next meeting, right?
It's 2 weeks
I think
away.
2 weeks
Yeah.
is enough time.
But I'm saying,
You have to get it to him
it'd be
before
cool
we
if
can
I had a
compile the
couple days to.
information.
Oh, okay, so 1 week, okay.
Some stuff.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
so
Yeah, that's fine.
How about 10 days?
10 days, so, no math on this, already too much math tonight. So 10 days, that would be Friday the 3rd, and then we're going up for the 8th? Or, does that work?
Does that give you enough time?
Sorry, we don't meet on the 8th.
Meeting on the 1st.
I think we should just.
So it'll be by the 27th of
All
May.
right, one week.
Yeah.
1 week. So,
So you'll have a week to compile.
how about the end of next week?
Sounds good.
Sure,
How about noon Friday?
sounds good.
27th.
27th,
Yeah, before you get out of town for Memorial Day.
5/27.
Yep,
12 PM.
okay.
Okay,
Yep.
got it.
If anybody needs that, then we'll get John a hard copy. 5/27. Thanks. And then just for context, so this is going to kick off our new evaluation schedule.
Correct.
Fill me in. You take it from there.
So the evaluation will be completed 5/15. Mr. Ward was, I'm drawing a blank right now. So then we have the goals presented to
Yeah.
Mr. Ward by August 14th.
Yep, okay.
He meets with his department heads by
Yep.
September 15.
Yep.
They meet with their employees by October 15.
Terrific. Okay, thank you. Anything else on that?
Nope.
Thank you. Ed would like to consider discussions on funding for a conservation aid.
We can.
Move on that one?
We can table that.
Table that one, thank you. A couple standing things, Assistant Town Administrator Search Consultant. Michael and I stayed after the Budget Subcommittee hearing yesterday and met with the Community Paradigm Associate Rep, who has completed our community profile and given us a breakout that we can use for an ad. They're going to start sending that out. And Michael, my notes are in another notebook on that one, if there's anything else we can fill in on that. But the idea was, what was the date, like the 10th? Again, forgive me, I
Yeah,
had
I think,
another
I think
notebook.
around
I left at work.
mid-June, so they were
Okay.
going to start advertising this weekend, and I think the resumes be due by mid-June.
Okay.
And then we'd start to go from there.
Great.
So.
And not to pick at a scab, but yeah, apparently that's terribly underfunded. So hopefully we'll get somebody, or we can go back
And it was included on that.
Terribly underfunded?
So,
Sweet.
yeah. So we'll see what we get there. Human Resources Manager search, we are finalizing the interview schedule with a short list of candidates. Any news on that, Mr. Ward?
Yeah, just, I had a tentative day for this week, but I just couldn't, trying to get the warrant done, I couldn't meet this week. So off week with next week, that's our intent, is to get
Terrific.
everyone out here next week and do 2 days of interviews, and then we'll have that round done.
Okay.
So.
Can you-
Questions?
Can I request that,
Question.
can Can you email us the names of
Oh,
the
absolutely.
finalized candidates, and then that way we can
Yep,
sort
absolutely.
those
No,
resumes out,
no,
please?
absolutely, and I was, we had gotten, everybody had submitted their recommendations, so those are ranked now, so based on, how many members, votes per, for lack of a better word, per person, so those will be ranked on the number of interest, candidate interest. Yep, so I'll send that out in the morning, absolutely.
No, I was gonna ask to say, I'm on the committee.
Good,
But I know
okay.
we gave our input, but
Great.
we haven't heard back on,
Okay.
for interview.
I'm not on it.
What? Oh, you're on the committee too.
Okay.
Well, the committee never met, really, so I'm not totally sure.
On our American Rescue Act Task Force, the town administrator has put together a task force that will recommend projects to the select board for use of funds under the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA. Members of this group will include the Director of Community and Economic Development, Health Agent, DPW Superintendent, Police Chief, Fire Chief, Superintendent of Schools, Social Services, Senior Center / Suite, and the Town Administrator.
Yeah, so, Mr. Chair, if I could,
Please.
just to make a quick comment on it, we try to look at the areas of what the funding was directed towards. So it's really for COVID mitigation, so it's public health, public safety, economic development to try to recover from the pandemic or to prepare for hopefully we won't need a next one. But we didn't, we kind of didn't want a huge committee, kind of wanted small enough to kind of manageable to work with, but there are going to be areas with social service, whether it be some meetings we'll talk with the senior center for their needs, and maybe we for community needs, but also maybe housing to see what housing needs will be there. So there will be, people will bring in for different meetings, but at least the core group will be kind of based on what the core needs of the ARPA money will be for. And certainly welcome if there's someone on the board that would want to sit in or drop in or be kept abreast as a board liaison, feel free to let me know that as well too.
Great. We'll have regular updates on that. It's a great opportunity, and we want to take
But I
make the most of it.
appreciate that process, because I think it's ultimately going to be up to the board, but at least it'll give us the opportunity to do that, get that information out, research, kind of rank some projects, and really be able to bring a comprehensive plan to the board, and then, pick and choose what you think is best from there.
Great. Questions, comments? Thank you. Any other old and new business? Any committee reports? Hearing none, that's the end of our agenda for tonight. We will be exiting open session and entering to 3 executive sessions. The first under Article 3 of the Open Meeting Law for a fire union grievance hearing. The second one under Article 6 of the Open Meeting Law to discuss 525 Water Street tax taking closing. And another Article 3 to discuss the public safety dispatcher contract. We will not be, oh, sorry, we got to vote on that. Yep, sorry, we forgot to do the warrant. So we're going to come back to the warrant. Is there a motion to approve the warrant as presented?
I'll make a motion to approve the articles as they're presented.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion?
You guys subject to input from town administrator / town council?
Yes. Anything else? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? 5-0. Thanks for the reminder. To repeat, we'll be entering 3 executive sessions. We'll be returning to open session only to adjourn for the evening. Our next meeting is June 1st. Reminder that town meeting is June 6th. Town election is June 13th. Please come out and vote. I will do a roll call now to enter executive session under Article 3. Ed?
Aye.
Matt?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
And the chair is aye. Thank you and good night.